Hi, everyone. How are you doing today? My name is Neil Costa, and really appreciate you taking time out of your day to join our webinar on Google Analytics 4, what it means for your career site and talent acquisition team. So if you're not familiar with the term Google Analytics 4, there's a relatively important and I would say at this stage urgent change that's coming about. And that's why we decided to put this webinar together and give folks as much guidance and help as needed as you consider, what's next for managing the metrics on your career site and understanding all your marketing analytics as it relates to your talent acquisition and recruitment marketing efforts. So with that, why don't we go down to next slide here. If you're not familiar with HireClicks, we've been a recruitment advertising agency in the industry since 2010. We really focus on three practice areas. We're a recruitment advertising agency, typically an agency of record for our clients. So that puts us kind of squarely in our clients' corner, working as an extension of their team, helping them with their campaigns on Indeed, their contracts on LinkedIn, measuring ROI on those, but also helping them leverage consumer advertising as well, Spotify, YouTube, you name it. All of those recruitment advertising agency channels and services are something that we're providing a lot of support to our clients on. Secondly, we do creative services. That includes landing page design, full career site design, and really anything you need, whether it's online, offline. We've got some great retention, tools and boxes, and rebooting employer branding programs, and rebooting employee referral programs. The third part, which is really unique to HireClicks, is that we have a strategic talent acquisition consulting group. And so that's a group on our team that has former practitioners on it. That's led by Carrie Yarnott, who's our VP of Strategic Consulting. She's a former VP of Talent Acquisition over at SAIC. And basically, we help clients figure out, some of the challenges that come behind the scenes in their TA operations. Again, doing employer branding research and help them bring, personas and bring an employer brand to life. So that's a little bit about us. We've been at it for quite some time here, and these educational webinars are certainly a big part of how we inform and educate our clients, as well as the overall talent acquisition community. So with that, we can bounce down to the next one. Who you have here today? I already kind of gave you my background, as the founder here, but prior to that, I was over at Monster on the internal advertising team. Used to work at Monster.com and really managed a significant part of the consumer marketing budget to drive job seekers back to the site. I've also got with me today Michael Campbell, who's a marketing data analytics manager at HireClicks. He's part of our development operations team, the team that works on all of our reporting and really just a huge part of marketing today is pulling all that data together. So Mike's going to be your guide through the GA4 discussion, Google Analytics 4 discussion, and I'll be adding color commentary along the way. So Mike, thanks so much for putting all this together for everyone.
Yeah, definitely excited to jump into this topic. It's definitely a hot topic that's out there in the market, and really my role at HireClicks has really been to work with our clients on what type of data can we tap into and how can we centralize that in a way that you can tell your story. And having career site metrics, what's happening on your career site, what's that job seeker journey look like, is a big part of how that comes into play. So with these big updates happening with the Google Analytics interface, we definitely want to make that front and center and really give you some key takeaways that coming off of this, you have a few action items you can go in, whether it's just making sure that everything is up to speed and running accurately, but also how can you use those and incorporate them into your strategy going forward and optimize that.
Sounds good. So why don't we, I'll just hand it over to you, Mike, and you can take it from here. And like I said, I'll add some comments as well, but go for it.
Definitely, yeah. So when it comes to Google Analytics, the platform's been around for quite some time now. The current Universal Analytics, which you may be familiar with, has been around since 2004, 2005. But really recently, there's been a lot of conversations on shifting into this cookieless world, and how does tracking and privacy come into play with that. So we're going to go through just some overview on some of the factors that are causing this shift. from a market perspective, and why Google may be making some of these changes to their platform, and why some of the timelines and reasons behind that are at play. So with the overall shift to GA4, a big focus of that is going to be Google preparing itself for this cookieless world and really looking at what type of data is available, what can we track, what can't we track, how can we use that in our data modeling and make that available to our users so they can use that for insight. But really, as of the past few years, there's been some legal things that have happened, specifically with the EU, that have really put some pressure on Google to follow certain timelines or make certain decisions on what they can and can't use in terms of their platform. So we won't go through too detailed on the legal side, but I think it's important to see what are some of the reasons why they may be making these decisions. And a lot of times you'll see Google want to go and make an update or a feature as part of their overall suite, and then you may see, okay, it's going to generally be released next year, or maybe some timelines get pushed back a few months as they're doing beta tests. But with this change, you'll definitely see a harder timeline at play here that we want to make you aware of.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that's been absolutely critical is that this is for all of our personal privacy, right? I mean, these changes that are happening, GDPR and California has started to take some action on protecting individuals' privacy. So we all we're tracked more often, and then we also saw Apple last year, right? Make some really big changes in privacy policy. So it's really to protect our individual privacy rights. But the EU has been far more aggressive in enforcing this from a legal perspective.
Yeah, really dating back to January 2022, that's where we saw kind of the first mark of it, and then almost became a domino effect across that, where first it was the Austrian Data Protection Authority, and then French Data Protection. And you can see going down the timeline here, other ones followed suit on really determining that Google Analytics was an illegal platform that they weren't going to allow to be used in that country. So from Google's perspective, they had to make those changes. And then also when we look at potentially the timelines of it, why they may be a little bit more aggressive than some other platforms. So now we'll go into some of the specific changes that'll happen with the platform. There's going to be things visually that happens. There's going to be differences in the focus on what some of the metrics are. Some of the metrics are actually going to be changing. So if you're comparing things side by side, it's going to be important to have that context. But first, addressing the legal side of it, and even from a compliance standpoint, the way that analytics collects data and removes data is going to be the first big change that's going to happen. So the amount of data points that Google is looking at and actively storing, you'll definitely see a difference of that, and because of that, you'll see a shift in what are some of the main focuses of the dashboard and the main takeaways on where you can make those decisions off of. And then from a data removal standpoint, there's going to be less runway that we have to tap into historical data with some of these upcoming changes. And even when we look at some of the historical data that you've been collecting with Universal Analytics, those are things that are ultimately going to be going away at a certain point. So we'll talk through the best ways to archive that data, get some of your relevant data and reports, so you have that, and then you're in a good position to transition over to the new system.
Yeah, even in our own industry, I mean, the idea of the advertising industry in general has been saying that we're moving to a cookieless world for quite a while, but in our industry, Indeed made a very specific policy change last year. Was it last year, Mike? I think it was basically Indeed has said we're not using cookies to track anymore. You need to remove conversion tags from your career site. So you're seeing an advertising industry, self-regulate to some degree and decide to shut cookies off and not use cookies because there might be liabilities there if they're tracking people the wrong way or tracking, down to the individual. I think that's the real change here. So someone like Indeed has been proactive and said we're going to take all conversion tags off and protect themselves from liability by doing so. And I think that this move by Google is basically in that same vein. They have no other choice. They have to change the platform. The way they've collected data for almost 20 years is at this stage, based on the laws, now illegal. So this is a critical if you haven't taken action yet, it's a critical time to figure out what you can do and what you can't do.
So now looking at some of the key focuses of GA4, you're going to see a huge focus on what Google refers to as event-based, tracking and event-based data modeling. So it's going to be less focus on just how many people overall kind of landed on your site, but once they're on there, what happens and what types of actions do they take? How engaged are they? So we're going to be, calling to that a lot throughout this presentation, but that's first and foremost going to be a big focus of GA4 is this new event-based metric. Another thing going forward, just with the landscape, with machine learning, AI, there's going to be a lot of integrations with that in the system going forward. When we look at predictive metrics, how a lot of the new features and updates that Google is going to make, you'll probably see those buzzwords hand in hand with that on ways to integrate that to GA4 and then also the Google Suite as a whole. And then also when we look at integrating your data across multiple devices and platforms, some of this may be a little bit more tailored to the e-commerce users out there, but creating different data streams, which have been around for a little bit, but really centralizing that into your main analytics platform to be able to look specifically at what's the activity like on my website versus my app, or if we talk about the management of your career site versus maybe your ATS tracking system, or maybe some additional landing pages. There's ways to manage those all within analytics through the different data streams that are available.
Yeah, I mean, like GA4, Google Analytics is a key tool for organizations to use in their e-commerce operations. We don't take dollars and cents for applicants. We basically we have a different kind of checkout process. That being said, a lot of the changes that are made when you talk about especially number 3 and 4. Integrating your data. You've got people like, consumer brands like Kohl's or Target or Best Buy who have an app, have a website, and have a mobile site, and they basically, want to make sure that all the data is working together. So there's a lot of back-end work to make sure it all comes together in one source. So that way that, GA4 kind of architects with all of those platforms in mind. And then the last part, number 4, it's primarily for e-commerce. Where you can take all of this audience data that you're accumulating in GA4 and then use it on the media buying platforms. But we've started to see ways that we can use, what's really called first-party data. What about the audience that comes to your site, your career site, and how do we activate that on Google's ad platforms or even other ad platforms as well. So there's a lot of enablement with using that first-party data, although in a completely protected and anonymized way, versus before where you could identify people right down to the IP address.
So now we'll go into some of the specific metrics that you may see adjustments with in the platform. Sessions is going to be something you're really familiar with if you've been in Universal Analytics, but that's really going to make a shift to this new events metric moving forward. So you can see kind of the side-by-side comparison there on how some of the tracking and the workflow of it will be adjusted, but really the event is going to drill down and start to track, once they're on that page, what specific actions are they taking? Are they clicking on a specific button? Are they scrolling for additional content on the page? These are all things where there's going to be kind of a crop of default measurements that are available in there, but then you have the ability to add custom ones on top of that. And especially when we talk about tying that back from a job seeker workflow, ways to drill down to specific triggers on how are they interacting with content on the site? How are they interacting with aspects of the apply process? Those are all things to start kind of having that mindset for. And as we talk about making custom adjustments, that's going to be a great way to tailor that over to, less focus on, say, an e-commerce sort of a workflow to more of a TA specific one. And now if we look at, goals versus conversions, traditionally if you were in the system making custom goals, it was a little bit of a process to go and establish those. You're taking multiple steps to build out those triggers based on how your website's structured, to validate those, to incorporate those in the reporting. Now, Google's making a shift into more built-in conversions in the system. And then even if you go to look to build custom conversions off of that, it's a much more streamlined process to just a few steps. And based on how your Google Analytics is placed, if you're leveraging a Google Tag Manager placement on that, that's going to make it even more streamlined. So we talk about kind of best practices on implementing tags on your site. If there's the opportunity to incorporate, say, Google Tag Manager placement, that's going to give you so much more flexibility and freedom to create custom conversions very quickly in GA4, so that you want to track specifically a job seeker coming in, clicking on a specific button on the career site, or filling out a specific talent form that maybe looks at building a recruitment marketing platform, or if they're going even down to apply start buttons or apply complete buttons. Every career site's gonna have a slightly different structure for what opportunities are there, but it gives you the with the conversions and creating those custom conversions, the ability to establish those. And we talk about tailoring the GA4 system to you, to be able to see that entire workflow and someone landing from the site, clicking for content, clicking through to actually taking action on an apply. These are some great ways to make that really useful and relevant information to make strategies and decisions off of that.
Yeah, and if you're not familiar with, Google Analytics is kind of simple. It's like a little snippet of code you add to every page. Google Tag Manager, if you haven't heard that before, or if you're not using that, is really useful. I mean, we've been using it now for, since it came out, so it's probably like, I don't even know, 7-8 years at this point, Mike. And effectively, if you think about Tag Manager, it looks similar in a way. It's just like, again, a little snippet of JavaScript code that goes on every page. But Google Tag Manager acts as a bucket. So when you have like a bucket that you can put many, many tags in, and then you can kind of regulate what those tags do in a Google interface. So the bucket serves as like, if you get, if Glassdoor wants to put a conversion tag, or LinkedIn wants to put a conversion tag, or you want to put from Google AdWords, you want to put a conversion tag, you kind of put them all in the Google Tag Manager bucket. And that way you don't have to keep placing, all these 10, 12 different JavaScript tags on every page. Tag Manager lets you orchestrate all of those into one tag, put them in one bucket. That way you place the Tag Manager once, and you can add all of the other tags separately in the back end. You don't have to keep asking the web team or development team or HRIS team to keep placing tags. So the fact that Google's been using that for some time and has decided to reward those people that understand it and use it by incorporating better conversions in the back end of their new interface is really important. So if you're not using tag managers today, definitely a key thing to understand and get help on if you wanted to kind of have more comprehensive reporting and conversion reporting. And it's just another conversions too. It seems like it's simple, right? We just haven't applied, but we don't. We have many more things that we want people to take action on. We want to know, can they, as Mike mentioned, can they sign up for a Google form through a form to end up in our talent community? Can they watch a video? Anything can really be an event, and whether they watch those, whether they fill out those forms, that gives us intel on what content's working, what forms are working, and which types of people are actually coming in through the door that way.
Now, if you look at some of the, the adjustments to the metrics that are being, modified throughout the system. Now, if you go and you want to start looking at, key takeaways and looking at reporting and what reports are going to be relevant, there is going to be a big shift on that in terms of just, how the system looks when you log into it, what types of preset ones are available. So you can see the side-by-side difference here, where before was almost, over 100 predefined reports are available in Universal Analytics. You mentioned that platform has really been, up and running for the past 20 years or so. So as they've been making adjustments over time, they've been adding more and more reports. But all said and done, there's probably not a high volume of these that you're actively going through and consistently looking at. You may have a few go-to ones that we can look at, ultimately mimicking in GA4, but they're definitely going to be slimming down the ones that are available once when you log into the system. Really, the main focuses of the GA4 reports, it's going to be a few buckets. One's going to be your top referrals, so what sites or referring sources are really driving the most traffic. You're going to have reports focused on that event metric, so what did they do on the site, what type of actions did that take place. There's going to be a preset section that's kind of focused on the monetization side, so a lot of those e-commerce users, there's going to be some ones available in there. And then ones that are tailored towards, your some demographic information in terms of what locations are they from, what are your main countries, states, things like that, but staying a little bit more at that higher level. And then device insights as well. So were they more laptop users, mobile users? So those are going to be the ones that are more preset and available once you log into the system. Like I said, if there's ones that you tapped into from Universal Analytics that may be going away, or as you're kind of taking that pause internally and thinking through what's the relevant data for our business, what is going to be the ones that's going to help us make key decisions, those are ones where you're going to want to take that time to make a custom report for that, to add that to the mix of the ones that are already available.
Yeah, we were preparing for this webinar, we were talking about the 100 predefined reports, and we were saying how it's like it's a little bit of a Frankenstein creation. Like, they just kept adding more and more reports, and they almost, in many ways, seemed, really less and less useful. They were just kind of like one-off reports they kept stuffing into the back end. And we think GA4 provides a fresh start and some simplicity. If you're not in Google Analytics every day, it'll probably be a breath of fresh air to see how it's been slimmed down and how the reports have been now developed to focus on what's important, what's actually happening, versus like all these random metrics that are just not as useful. And we can only digest so much, and I think that GA4 does a nice job of kind of cleaning it up and making it more usable and put you in a better position to just grab key information and make decisions based on those reports.
Just to show you a side-by-side comparison, because when you log in, there will be a visual difference. We mentioned the amount of tabs and drop downs that are available in that left-hand panel. That's going to be streamlined. Some of the preset reports on that home page is going to start to be modified. So you can see with this older UA focused dashboard, a lot of it was focused on that sessions. Just how many people overall volume landed on the site and kind of what was the trends for that. As we shift into more of the GA focus, you can see that streamlined viewpoint. Just a few key navigation tabs and a key trend line that you're looking at. And then as you start to drill down, it's going to be more on that engagement side, a little bit less on the quantity, more on the quality for what are they doing on that side, how are they interacting, how engaged or how much of a quality visitor landed on that site. And one key thing that's actually not going to have a major change, but we definitely wanted to take some time to talk through it is UTM tracking. This is something that a lot of people will implement with their analytics platform to track specifically what sites are their top referrers, but even if they're doing specific focuses or types of campaigns on those sites, to be able to easily call those out within the platform. So the overall tracking structure isn't going to have any major shifts to it, which is great. But you still want to make sure, across the board, you're using what we refer to as that holy trinity of UTM tracking. So you have your UTM campaign, source, medium. Those are really going to be your main buckets to, as you're looking at your top referrals, be able to identify and group them to see what trends or where you're having the most success for your traffic. And definitely want to call out, from that reporting perspective on where to get that data, because that's probably going to be one of the first things you're going to want to look at. So under that acquisition tab for reporting, that's where there's going to be those three main reports that are already built in with acquisition, overview, user acquisition, traffic acquisition. That's really going to have that streamlined view into what are your top drivers for visitors. And with this opportunity, it gives you that opportunity to go through an audit and clean up your naming conventions. As if you've been having different campaigns where you've been using UTM tracking in the past, maybe that list has gone, rather long, or maybe there's opportunities to kind of regroup things in a certain ways. So as we're kind of having this, fresh flight into GA4, a great opportunity to customize that, especially if you're looking at, top GA sources like LinkedIn and Indeed. Are you accurately tracking and naming, maybe some of those different, properties that are available within each of those vendors and tracking them effectively?
I mean, I think that we still run into clients today, or new clients when we onboard them, that haven't really had the support from their existing agency where they've really had the diligence around tracking properly and setting up the campaigns properly. And it's unfortunately when we're looking at campaign data, if it's garbage in, it's garbage out. It's hard to get a good read on what's actually happening with your recruitment marketing dollars if you don't have the tracking set up the right way. And it's grunt work. It's really plumbing, and you have to figure out like how to set this up properly. And even just little things like setting up, Indeed, UTM tracking with, organic versus what you get for paid. And it's just really like, a kind of a simple thing, but there's lots of opportunities, when you look at like LinkedIn, like the different ad units, whether it's job slots or whether it's, other types of ad units. And then when you start getting out into the social side, are you putting, the proper links on content versus paid ads on Meta? So, it's really a lot of due diligence and time that goes into setting this up properly. So that way you can get a real read on the back end in Google Analytics and in the new platform. And then also it's important to have those tracking codes follow people all the way into the applicant tracking system. So we can see not only who's coming to the site, who's engaging with the highest degree of quality, but who's actually completing the applies, who's getting through the hiring process and eventually hired. So this like UTM tracking is again, not glamorous stuff, but it's a really important thing, especially as more and more focus comes down on, budgets and what are we spending money on and what are we getting in return. We always talk about having our team prepare our clients to have a conversation with the CFO. And if you have bad tracking or kind of loose standards around the diligence around it, you're putting yourself at a disadvantage. When you spend $1, if you don't have an answer on what happened, that's a pretty tough spot to be in.
Now we'll look into the actual timeline of what's happening. We mentioned some of that legal pressure that's at play, but in terms of what Google has set out for what this transition looks like and what are some of the steps that we're looking at for this year. So really March 2023, Google started streamlining the way to create GA4 implementations if you're a pre-existing user. So if you go into Google UA now and you have that set up, you're going to see prompts all over the dashboard in terms of setting up your new GA4. Is it running properly? Streamlining and setting that up. So even if Google's kind of already pushed you towards that, you're still going to go through it and look at, from an implementation standpoint, is everything placed correctly? If you're using Tag Manager, it's a pretty streamlined process to just make that switch so that the new GA4 is getting picked up. If you just have your traditional placements where they're going into the actual site and placing it with your web team, those are things that you're going to want to look at too on, are they placed correctly? Are things starting to track? So really now as we look at the month of June, that's where, Universal Analytics is still up and functioning. We are closing in on that window where Google is going to start to sunset that system. So really by the next 2 weeks here, by July 1st, you really want to take that time to look at your GA4 implementation and is that currently running? As we shift over to July 1st, that's where Google is going to start to turn off UA and its ability to track. So that's where that runway is going to be important on even comparing the data side by side. We mentioned some of the metrics and key data points that may be shifting, but just kind of seeing those two running concurrently and seeing, from an overall traffic volume perspective, are they reporting similar numbers? Those are kind of just good auditing practices to use while you have that available runway where both could be functioning before UA gets sunset. And if we look towards the end of the year, Google hasn't given an exact date on this, but they estimate about 6 months or so after they sunset Google Universal Analytics that they'll start to purge and delete the historical data for that. So that's something where you're going to want to take that opportunity to think about what's your most relevant data that you've used from the previous system, and take the opportunity to export it and host it yourself, so that you can always tap into that if you need to. There's some key things you can do with BigQuery exports and things like that. We're having some conversation with clients around, but the ability to go in and grab those key reports and that way you have it. So you're going to want to make sure you do that by the end of the year while you still have that runway to tap in the historical data while that's still active. And we mentioned, Google kind of trying to streamline the process for those pre-existing users. So if you log in, you see those prompts, you click on it, it's going to put you into the GA4 Setup Assistant. You can also navigate to that by going into the admin settings, and it's going to be one of the first things you see available there. That's where it's going to kind of take you to a step-by-step process on making sure that's implemented, making sure data is flowing with that. And then also, if you want to get to the point where you're linking additional systems, it's all kind of packaged together in that one Setup Assistant, which makes it very handy. Now, if we look at some best practices as we're getting it set up, as you're transitioning into the new system, what are some key things to keep an eye out for and to think about? So this is kind of like a step-by-step guide as you're going through that process. So going in and actually looking at your GA4 placements, making sure that's activated, making sure it's set up on your site. There's an option in there as you're going through that to, basically it's a one checkbox thing for enhanced measurement. That can be helpful, a quick way to just, predefine a few settings in there, but something you want to take a pause and just take a look at. Is that tailored for your business? There's certain things in terms of automatically tracking forms and contact forms and how they're filled out on if that gets captured, as we talked about those conversions. So those are things that, for the most part should work, but you just want to make sure that that's going to be tailored for what's going to make sense for your business. Key thing I definitely want to point out is looking at your data retention. So that's something that's going to be in the admin settings. Once you shift into GA4, the default runway for that is 2 months. So after that, it's now, if a 2-month look back, it's not going to keep that data. So there is the option to adjust that to 14 months, but it's something you have to go in the settings and make that adjustment for. So especially having longer runway, the ability to look back, especially as you're getting that new placement up and running, making sure that's working correctly, seeing those trends, that's going to be a key adjustment to make for sure. We mentioned just the validating the connections between UA and GA4 as we have that runway available now. There's going to be ways to link in across the whole Google infrastructure. So if you leverage Google Search Console, there's ways to tap into that to link those two platforms. If you're on the media buying side, or you're partnering with an agency partner, Google Ads and Campaign Manager, as we mentioned, some of the machine learning and optimization that's going to be available. As those systems start communicating with each other, you're going to see more and more of those features where we're going to be able to optimize campaigns and really be really strategic and effective with those based on some of the the data we're collecting on the from the career site experience. And also from a reporting perspective, start thinking about, are there key reports that maybe we need to build out as a custom report in the system? If you use visualization tools like Looker Studio, Data Studio with Google, you may have a pre-existing connection with that. There's going to be different API quotas that come into play where maybe those pre-existing reports may not work based on the volume of data that's going through. So those are things you're just going to want to spot check and maybe reconnect with that more of a streamlined GA4 view. And then the historical data, as it's probably rare you're going back and looking at multiple years of career site data, consistently. Benchmarks in terms of, a visitor going to the site, hitting that apply button. If that data is available, would be helpful to pull from a historical report. And we mentioned, some of the value of, setting this up with a tag manager placement. This is one when you talk about in terms of activating your GA4 on the site, because that bucket of tag manager tags are already there. It's just, about a 2-minute process to go in and just activate that GA4. So that can definitely streamline things. But even taking that opportunity to think about what's that journey look like for the job seeker, and what's going to be important triggers to capture along the way. So this is one where we went through and made up custom events for someone clicking a search button on the website, someone going and clicking on a certain button that led them to more content versus another button that led them to actually go and take action on the apply. So because we're able to easily set these up in Tag Manager, now when we look at a report in GA4, we're able to see these are the amount of people that laid out the site, and this is where they were most active or where they gravitated to the most, and what that journey looked like. So now as we have this, transition runway, it's good to kind of take that pause internally and have those conversations. When you look at your career site as a whole, what's the state of your career site? Is it optimized for mobile technology or just this updated tracking landscape? What type of data is going to be the most important to you? Is it just more overall volume, or are you drilling down to specific conversion paths and acquisition? From a data perspective, how do you tell that story? Are you using a visualization tool? Are you exporting that data and packaging it together in presentations and talking with that on, to your internal leadership? And then how do you reach your candidates and your talent pool? Where this is something that every single business is going through this. It's not just certain industries or things like that. Everyone's going to have to make these adjustments into this new landscape. So, or is there that opportunity to switch up the strategy or get ahead on some things to take that advantage when you look at some of your competitors? We also included just this breakdown with just some more just some definitions as a reference guide. You can see the difference on maybe some of the pre-existing metrics on how are they being tracked or adjusted from UA to GA4. A big one we wanted to call out was active users. You'll see much more of a focus on this in terms of some of the default dashboards or visualizations that are available in the system, but really making that shift in terms of the overall volume of people that are going to your site and having more of a streamlined view into who is actually active, who is actually engaged, who interacted with my content, and who ultimately moved along that process. So that's going to be a key one that you'll see built in a little bit more prominent in the new system. So we want to start to close here with just three main takeaways to keep in mind as you're coming off this webinar here. So we mentioned the timeline of it. Now is really the time to act for this. So you want to take this runway to compare those two systems side by side to make sure everything is implemented correctly and your data is accurate. And taking that runway as you have this fresh new system where we're to a certain extent starting from scratch on making those strategic business decisions on, is this data relevant? Is it helpful? How can we streamline the process of taking it and incorporating that into our everyday strategy? This is definitely the right way to, you regroup internally and start having those conversations. I mentioned from a tracking perspective, a lot of the structures of it may not be changing, but it's a good opportunity to audit things, optimize things, make the adjustments so that you're in a great place and be able to really bucket those things going forward so you can just jump in the system and see, this is my top performing sites where I'm getting traffic from. These are the ones that are driving the most quality. These are all ways to streamline that process. And also thinking about just your career site landscape. Is it from a usability standpoint, user experience standpoint, is it something where if the job seeker is landing on that site, is that a streamlined process for them? Are there any, pieces of the career site that may be hindering that experience or causing them to, jump off and look elsewhere? So those are all things to keep in mind on not only are you making ways to track each of those elements, but are there ways to update, the structure or the content or the presentation of the career site as a whole?
Very good. What else we have for? I think we're ready to do some. I think we're ready to do some Q&A, right? Yeah. So we've got a few questions that have come in, but please, anyone else that would like to contribute, feel free to type your question in the Q&A or to drop it in the chat, and we'll jump on them. So the first one we have is from Jake. Can you please talk more about UTM tags? What exactly are they? And can you provide a step-by-step process of how to add these tags to LinkedIn? So I'll start with that one. With UTM tags, basically, when you have a destination URL, careers.yourcompany.com, there's a UTM code that you can add to extend beyond that. It says UTM campaign, as you saw in the earlier slide, UTM source, UTM medium. And so by extending that URL with these UTM conditions, that might be, it's actually very easy to do. Google has a campaign URL builder, and I think I can actually put that in the chat to all. I'll try and do that while Mike's answering the next question. But basically, it's a way to say, I'm going to take this link, I'm going to use it on my LinkedIn feed. So in that particular case, the campaign itself, the campaign source would be LinkedIn, the medium might be, content, and the campaign might be related to celebrating, a diversity program on LinkedIn. So you could actually track, yes, it came from LinkedIn, yes, it came from content instead of paid posts like a job spot, and then it came from a campaign related to DE&I and diversity initiatives. So that's really like what we were capable of. It's like not just seeing this traffic came from LinkedIn. When we properly use UTM tags, we're able to actually get that full detailed look at what's attracting someone to make the trip, to make the round trip visit all the way back to our career site. And we can provide some more details. I'll share the URL builder in the chat here as well with everyone. And then after that, we can always send a follow-up as well, Rachel. We could maybe include the campaign URL builder in the back end, of our follow-up. Mike, this one's probably more for you. Could you provide, from Patricia, could you please provide some key metrics that we should monitor frequently on our dashboards for a career website? Which of these would provide the most valuable insights into user behavior, website effectiveness, and areas of improvement? Are there examples of ideal career site dashboards? And Mike's our dashboard architect, so he's the right guy to answer that question for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's going to be a lot of different types of career site builds out there. So it is going to be custom to a certain extent on the structure of your site, how much content's built out on there, what that journey looks like, and even the overall infrastructure of all the technology at place. With career sites, your ATS, all those are definitely going to be attributing factors to it. But I think overall, looking at even from a homepage perspective, people just first land on your site. What's their opportunities from there? Do they have a streamlined view and to go and to click to look at new jobs or to look at content? So I think when you look at the new event metric on actually seeing how the people are taking action on those, are people just landing on the career site then leaving for that homepage, or are they going in, landing on the page, and then clicking to view more content or scrolling down the page to look at more? As you start to look at the default event ones that are in there, where you'll see the clicks, you'll see the scrolls. Maybe you're layering on some of those custom ones, where, with a specific apply button or things like that. That's where you'll start to get a good picture on how engaged are those users once they land on the platform. So that's the end goal, right? On getting them to ultimately fill out the application and apply into your system and taking advantage of that opportunity. So from a TA perspective, I definitely would tie that back to that full journey. But I think just, once someone lands on the page and looking at initial engagement from an event perspective is going to be a big focus going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think the key things are, if you have, 100,000 visitors that get to your career site in a week, a month, a year, whatever it is, you need to know where they came from. Like, what's the truth in that? Like, what's the source of those 100,000 people? And if you don't have tracking set up, source is really, really, the most critical. Once we know where they came from, what they did afterwards. We see the vendors like LinkedIn and Indeed say, hey, this is an apply start, like, way back on Indeed. But I think, when you're on the corporate HR team and you're doing the hiring, like, really until they get to our career site and they click apply, that's an apply start for us from our end goal, right? We paid for the fare to get them from LinkedIn or Indeed over to our career site. Once they click on that start button, that's when they're really in the weeds of our candidate experience, and what happens next, we have a lot more control over. So I think that apply start is really important. That applies, when you see like how much, someone looks at a job title and a job description, and you see, is it a really high apply start rate, 15, 20%, or is it a really low apply start rate of like 1 or 2 or 3%? That might tell you a lot about the content on that page. And in this particular case, if you're talking about a job detail page, that tells you a lot about the job title. Does it resonate with someone? You might get some of that from leap they take from the job board, but like when they really read through it and they're really on your site, what does that really mean? The other part is like, when you go out and you put all the effort into doing a video, or you put all the effort into, creating content, like, and you just realize that like, hey, nobody even looks at the benefits page. What can we do to create, but we have an amazing benefits package. We've got to do more. Like, what else can we do to bring this to life? And I think that, by looking at the metrics of like, who's looking at a page, who's engaging with the video, who's starting an apply, and then eventually who completed the apply, right? And then when we take those career site metrics, those are probably the big ones, right? Like, where did they come from? Did they start an apply? Did they engage with our content? Did they complete an apply? So to answer your question directly, Patricia, I think that's really what we focus on. And then when we start taking the applicant tracking system data, when we look at like, okay, if someone's got 20 different applicant states in their ATS, then we could say, well, which of these 20 are considered quality applicants? If they get submitted to a hiring manager, if they get submitted to, if they pass a phone screen, they do a first interview, second interview, offer extended. Those are all things that we'll put together with the sources to figure out which of our dollars is generating the best possible candidates to get hired. We don't just look at cost per hire and the source of hire, because we want to find out which channels delivered people that made it further down the pipe. So those are also key, but crosses over into the ATS a little bit. So hopefully that's helpful. Let's see, a question from Shannon. What resources do you recommend for an in-house recruitment marketing team who is trying to set up a Google Tag Manager? Mike, do you want to take that?
Yeah, there's, for Tag Manager specifically, there's so many different types of functionality you can leverage out of it. They're a really powerful tool. I think when it comes to even GA4 with Tag Manager, Google itself offers a lot of just kind of beginner, courses where you can kind of go through and run through not just getting a baseline lay of the land of the dashboard itself, the baseline usability of it. I would definitely kind of make those available, where some of them are, 20-minute, 30-minute kind of sessions you can go through, as a team, and then everyone just has a baseline level of experience with it. So I definitely, would put you in the direction of those. And then, based on your internal resources, if you have a web team or things like that, but you have the ability to get a Tag Manager placement, that's where we work with a lot of clients